right. Hey everyone, my name is Brittany Lewis. I am a professional artist, graphic designer, and illustrator, and we are back with another live stream working on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. So, if this is your first time joining me, I appreciate you for being here. We usually talk about an hour or so about the process of creating a tarot deck. Now, if you would like to support me, and I want to get this out the way as soon as possible, one of the easiest ways for you to do so is to hit the like button. So please be sure that you do that. Hit the like button that lets YouTube know that you value this content, and that maybe you would like to see other people enjoy the content as well. Another way that you can support me, this channel, and specifically the Cosmic Gateways Tarot Project is to visit my website, blewisarts.com, where I sell all kinds of t-shirts and books and canvas prints and all of those types of things. And again, that directly supports this particular project. And I'll have all of the links for everything down in the description. Now, to get a little bit of housekeeping in, again, we are working on the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. The Cosmic Gateways Tarot is a deck that I started, or is a project, I should say, that I started in 2019. My first card was completed in November of 2019. And it's something I've been working off and on for the last 5 years or so. And this is no exception. So what I've done this past summer was that I set aside very specific time to work on this project so that I can keep things consistent. Hey, Black Setsu, nice to see you. Keep things consistent and to actually just get this done, right? To get this project done. Now, if you've been here with me for the last few weeks, you may be very familiar with this image. The goal was to have this image completed this past week, but for whatever reason, the week just kind of got ahead of me and I lost track of time. So the beauty of working on something that is your dream project is that there really is no rush. So we're back at it. We're back at the Two of Swords. Now, again, if this is your first time joining me on this live stream, the Two of Swords is a card that represents decision making, right? Swords deal with the mental realm. You're dealing a lot with your thoughts and things like that. Now, the original source material, which was illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith, to me does not really read as decision. I guess the more you study it, the more you sort of see different nuances and things like that that were included in this particular card. But when I'm designing cards and when I designed this specific card, I wanted to keep in mind a new reader, right? So yes, it'll be, great for experienced readers, awesome for experienced readers. I also wanted to keep in mind people who may have never picked up a tarot deck before, and this is their first deck, right? And so I wanted the reading experience to be as easy and as seamless and as, not carefree, but just a very easy experience. So when I went into designing this, I wanted to make sure that I was able to illustrate decision making in a much more obvious way. So we're here. Now, over the past few weeks, we've primarily focused on the background because the background is going to be our focal point for this particular image. I wanted to highlight the two swords and the sort of clearing that they're in. So we've spent a lot of time rendering out the background of this particular image. Over this past week, I did get a little bit of work done. So one of the things that I did was work a little bit on the foreground. Now, I still have quite a bit to do on this. Not as much, of course, as I did by the end of our last live stream, but we'll get sort of right back into it, kind of jump into where I left off. Now, what I did do was give our foreground trees a little bit of texture, right? I've added some moss and things like that to the trees. I've also added some texture to the hills that the trees are sitting on. And then from there, I decided to work a little bit on the ground, and I'll sort of clean this up because it's looking a little muddy at the bottom where the tree sort of roots are, growing down into the ground. It's looking a little muddy to me. It's not necessarily clear. So I want to be able to tighten that up today. I also may very well, because we don't have too much. We don't have too much to work on. May very well work on our figure. So that's going to be the focus of today's live stream. So yeah, if you're joining me live or if you're watching the replay, I really greatly appreciate you being here. So this week, like I said, has gotten so far ahead of me. I think Friday, I was thinking that, I don't know, for whatever reason, I had it in my mind that it was Thursday. So I was like, okay, well, cool. It's Thursday. So I have tomorrow to work on this. And then I can probably work a little bit on the Two of Wands Saturday. And by Sunday, we'll be on a new card. But here we are. We are here working on this one again, but I think it's going to be good. I one of the things that I've come to realize about working on this project, first of all, this is the biggest project that I've ever undertaken in my entire career, right? So normally when if I'm doing like a book or something like that, there's usually no more than about 20 illustrations. This card consists of 78 images, right? So 78 images plus the guidebook plus the companion book, right? So there are quite a few moving pieces to this particular project. And in the process of creating this, I've learned a lot, right? So which is nice because it kind of helps translate into any client work that I may do. But I've certainly learned patience. I've definitely learned patience along the process of creating this, and so I don't really beat myself up too bad when I haven't gotten to the point or gotten to where I would like for this to be. It all happens, everything happens sort of in divine timing. One of the things that for sure I take into consideration is that this again is the largest project that I've undertaken, and it's okay to take your time with it, right? One thing that I don't want to do is rush a product, right? Or, rush the process, and not necessarily be true and authentic to the purpose of this project. And so, I have to take my time in doing that. So, yeah, it's taken me 5 years. We in this bad boy 5 years deep. I'm hoping that I'm not hoping it won't take another 5 years, but yeah, we're rocking on this thing. So one of the things that again I'm really thankful for is just being disciplined enough to set aside time so that I can sit here with you guys and we can work on this project. And you can kind of see a lot of the behind the scenes, what it takes, some of my thought processes behind developing the cards and that sort of thing. And I think that, for one, it holds me accountable, right? That's the main thing. It holds me accountable. And if I tell or if I, advertise that I'm going live, I should go live, right? I should hold to my word and I should do the thing I say I say I'm going to do. So in one regard, it definitely helps with that, which is nice. I also really look forward to Sundays every week. I It's one of those things where because I am wanting to, go ahead and finish this project, um, it's motivating me to work on this when I have free time, right? So it's not just like, oh, okay, I got to work on the tarot deck. Let me set aside time, and then I get distracted halfway through watching movies or whatever I'm doing, right? So if I'm having the goal to have something new and have you guys a fresh new experience every week so that we're working on a new card, every few weeks or so, I have to actually put in the work. So it's been awesome in that regard. It's definitely something that again I highly look forward to every week. And putting in the work throughout the week whenever I can, so that again you guys have something new to look at for the most part at the beginning of every Sunday. So yeah, if you're new here, welcome. I'm glad to have you. I know that number wise we are doing really well. It's been growing, which is nice. The whole purpose of me doing these live, of course, is to hold myself accountable, but to also raise awareness for this particular deck, right? So I know in 2020, when I was really working on it heavily, everybody was at home. We didn't have much to do. Most places were shut down. And so I was able to get a lot more foot traffic then because, we were all sort of at home for the most part, right? But I have to work a little bit harder now that, life is normalizing a little bit again. So we're here. But as someone who has now gone through this process and is continuing to go through this process, I will say again that I have learned quite a lot about managing a project of this size. I have learned quite a lot about myself in the process of creating something this size. And so I want to share with you guys some of the things that I've learned along the way. And especially if you are in the mind of creating something like a tarot deck, or if you have something in mind, a goal or something like that you want to accomplish. There are some things that I've learned, right? So when it comes to creating a tarot deck specifically, one of the things that I've learned, or would change moving forward and have been working on changing, is to have a little bit of a plan going in, right? So for me, because this was a project that I wanted to do for many, 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 many years, right? And it had gotten to a point in my career where I could not wait or overplan or like overthink or any of those types of things on this particular project. So I just kind of jumped in head first. Now, I have since found that uh, it works better for me to have some sort of a plan. So, the way I've sort of remedied that is that after these wands, or not wands, after these twos, for example, we'll go into it. But what I do is I take a group of about four cards, especially now that we're in the minor arcana cards. I'll take a group of four cards and I'll plan them out. Right, I'll go ahead and plan them out. I will usually have the sketches and things ready and together. This time is a little bit of an exception because I jumped into the live streams before I had like all of the sketches done. However, it's been working out pretty well. But I will normally have about all four of the sketches completed, so that when it's time for me to render, all I have to do is focus on painting the picture. Right, and so I find that that saves me a great deal of time. It keeps me organized, which is nice. And like I said, it saves time and it's just easier, right? As opposed to, okay, now that I finished this two of swords, gosh, I have to figure out which card to draw next. And then I'm, fumbling and trying to figure that out. So if I could do that in sets, for me, sets of four is manageable. So if I could plan ahead or give myself enough time to sort of plan a strategy, plan how I wish to approach certain things, that helps a good deal. Now, again, when I jumped into this particular project, I didn't have a plan, right? I didn't even have a name for it. I didn't have a name. I didn't have necessarily a theme in mind or anything like that. I just knew that I wanted to do this project and I did not have the luxury to continue to put it off. So I didn't, right? And so I jumped right in my very first card. I remember sitting down with a deck, tarot deck, and I pulled and asked the question, which should be the first card that I work on? And I pulled the Chariot card, and the Chariot became the very first card that I worked on. Now, one of the things that happened early on is that because I didn't have a plan or anything like that, I did have a sketch and everything was planned out in terms of the way I wanted the image to be laid out. When it came time for me to actually render it, I wasn't able to articulate the particular, idea that I had, right? So I was like, oh my goodness, this is the first card that I'm doing, and I'm already running into hiccups. So what I ended up doing was pivoting. Pivoting is something that I have learned along the process of creating this deck. Sometimes things don't necessarily go according to plan, right? So you don't want to spend too much time planning or, getting things down to a T unless you thrive in that space, right? Unless you're the type of person where every single step of every single thing has to be, planned out and executed exactly the way that you have it planned out, that's fine. But for me as a creative, it's easier to just pivot. Right. So, yes, I have a plan. Yes, I may have some sketches and things like that prepared, but I leave room for myself to explore other ideas as I'm creating. Because one of the things that I've learned is that I will have a pretty surface level idea of what a card means or what a card should be and the significance of different symbols in those cards, right? And I will go through the process and as I'm sort of moving about my day and thinking about this card, I will get additional sort of insight and information coming to a download, if you will, coming to my mind, coming to my perspective, that gives me some more insight into those cards. And then from there, I can actually add more to them, or I could take things away. A great example of this would be my page of cups. Now, I started my page of cups with the idea of having a little boy in a cave who's found like this magic lamp, right? For whatever reason, that was just in my mind. And so I've already drawn this card. Actually, before it got to be a cave, I think I had him find it in an attic. But I was like, okay, well, this is a water card. So maybe I should include some water elements into this card. And I was having a hard time drawing the attic. It was just too many moving pieces. I wasn't able to get the perspective right. So I was having some hiccups. So I pivoted and moved him into a cave. So I was like, okay, cool. I got the little boy finding the lamp, because the page of one, not the page of wands, the page of cups deal a lot with surprises and, making discoveries and things like that. And I was like, that would be awesome because I used to love the movie Aladdin, right? So he's finding a genie, a gin lamp. It could go one of two ways. It could probably, go in his favor, or it could be something that, a trickster being where he has to actually learn, but he won't know until he rubs the lamp. So that was the very surface level idea. And it just kept playing on my mind. I just kept hearing the word, oh, this is awesome. It'll be just like Aladdin. And as I was painting the picture, I remember my granddad, my mom's dad, we used to call, or people would call him LA. But his name is Aladdin. His name is Aladdin Heard. So that card then became very significant to my granddad, right? So I will get sort of those types of situations, those kinds of insights and downloads and things like that come into my mind as I'm developing a car. And so I think when it comes to something like this, particularly if you're into this kind of thing, some people are making decks because it's a very lucrative product, right? And that's okay. But if you're one of those types of people who are thinking of creating a tarot deck or an oracle deck or whatever it is that you're creating, I challenge you to be very open to in the process, right? Allow yourself to be moved by, whatever experiences you're having, by things that you've learned along the way, and those things create magic within the images and the message that you're trying to send. And so those little stories and things like that, anecdotes, are a lot fun to tell because, I'm approaching it from a very surface level, sometimes very surface level perspective, and just to kind of get those additional insights of why I was moved to, make certain decisions is a lot of fun, right? So be open to pivoting, be open to changing things. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. And that's something that I think as a creator, because a lot of times us as creators tend to be perfectionists, right? And so as a perfectionist, as someone who has who's very serious about my craft and very serious about the things that I do, sometimes we can sort of get so bogged and tied to a specific idea that we don't allow ourselves to explore alternatives, which kind of aids in our growth. So being able to, continue to be open to learning and continuing to be open to receiving messages and, using my own personal experiences, I think adds to sort of the magic of this deck. But prior to me having those sorts of, or I will say prior to me allowing myself to actually work on this dream project, the two things didn't coincide, right? I'll just paint what I thought people wanted to see. And that's not always, I would argue that's really never the right way to go about it. So if you're wanting to, be creative, if you're wanting to make a career as an artist, a lot of the times it's best to create based on what it is that you want to see, right? So that's something else that I've learned, that it's okay to have people. It's actually awesome to have people resonate with your work, right? But in order to remain grounded in that and to remain authentic and to tell, your story and to avoid burnout, a lot of times is the best way to go about doing that is to just paint what you want to see, right? You don't have to worry about what other people are going to like or what other people are, going to resonate with, because chances are, well, there are no chances to it. There's an audience for everything, right? There's an audience for everything. So it's a lot easier for you to appeal to the things that you actually want to see, as opposed to trying to appeal to the masses, because you'll burn out, right? I burned out. I can speak it completely from experience because I spent a lot of years creating fan art. Now, one thing that I will say, just as a slight tangent, is that when I was creating fan art, it was always reflective of the stuff that I like, right? It was always the movies that I like, usually the movies I grew up on. It was, the cartoons and things like that. So while, yes, I was creating fan art to appeal to a larger audience, I was also very mindful that I was creating stuff that I actually liked. So that when I'm at a convention and somebody's like, oh yeah, I love that, show enough picture, I can actually have a genuine conversation about show enough because I like show enough, right? But to take that to the next level, when you're creating something like a tarot deck, or you create whatever it is that you're creating, you want to make sure that it's something that you actually like, right? No matter what it is. If you're doing a podcast and you're trying to figure out, which direction to take your podcast, make sure that you're taking it in a direction that feels right for you, right? Make sure you're talking about something that you actually want to talk about. because then you'll never run out of things to share, right? Similar to this particular live stream, because I was going to sit down and work on this anyway, but I also enjoy talking about it. I'll never run out of things until this is done. Once this is done, then we'll have a slightly different conversation. But in the meantime, because this is something that I enjoy so much, it's not difficult for me to sit here and talk to you guys for an hour. I want to see this myself. And I often watch them back myself. And the funny thing is that I watch them and it's like watching somebody else. So do the things that you actually thoroughly enjoy, right? That way, when it gets to the point where it's difficult or slightly challenging, or maybe you've hit an obstacle or a roadblock or anything like that, you won't resent the project, right? So if you're working on something that you don't really care about and you kind of get to that, and obstacles happen, right? You get to a point where you've run into sort of a brick wall and you have to pivot. You don't sort of lose sight of the goal because this is something that you actually want to do. Now, I know there's been plenty of times where I've had projects that I wasn't necessarily connected to, and they would get rough, and then I start resenting the client, right? Right? Like, man, why in the world do they have me doing X, Y, and Z? But really, it's on me. If I didn't wasn't connected to the project, or I wasn't connected to what it was that they were producing, or what it was that I was helping them to produce, I shouldn't have taken that job. Now, sometimes we got to take jobs that we have to take, and that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can help it, if you are sort of doing the things that you want to do, those dream jobs and things like that, do what you actually want to do. If you're thinking about going back to school and maybe you're like, okay, well, I don't know what I should study, but I know this field makes a lot of money, and that field makes a lot of money and things like that. Don't worry so much about that. Money is very important, and I love money just as much as the next person. However, it's more important for you to focus on something that you actually want to do. So that's something that I sort of learned along the way as I've made my way through these 30 plus cards. And and I think it's a valuable lesson and things to kind of take into consideration. Now, I know, again, sometimes we get into things, and the first thing we're considering is the financial aspect of it. And that's fair. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We all have to eat, we all have to live. A lot of us have children and, families and things like that to take care of. But you'll be miserable if you invest a ton of time doing something that you really, really don't want to do. So this is your world, right? You're creating your own reality, and if you're doing so, you might as well do the stuff you want to do. Just that simple. Now, what I've done here is just added a little bit of um, atmosphere, a little bit of greenery to the sides of my trees. And now that I'm looking at it, I'm wondering if I should have done this on a symmetry layer so that it's mirrored. So I don't know. I'll probably fiddle with it a little bit. I don't know how I feel about it, but I am filling in sort of some of the atmospheric gaps. I did paint in a rough rock. I'm not really sure. I don't know if I'm going to keep it. I don't know if I'm going to keep any of this, but we're going to enjoy it while we have it. So I've done that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my light source, which is the lantern that our main character is holding. And what I'm going to do is figure out how far this light source is going to reach. So right now I do have some light reflective on the ground because and I'm going to look at my second monitor here, because this is a little bit dark and this is a very dark image. I might punch it up a little bit. I'm not really sure yet. I know for sure the whole image is going to brighten up once I go into post, but for the time being and for the sake of just kind of keeping things easy for myself so I don't have to go and manipulate multiple layers, what I'm going to do is do my best to sort of punch up certain things, meaning making them a lot brighter, making them stand out a little bit more, and then we will go into, just moving around the image. So I just added the bushes sort of in between the trees. I actually like this one a lot better than, I don't even know if they showed up. I like this one. There we go. A lot better than I like this one. So I don't know. We'll see. So yeah, I am working currently in Clip Studio Paint, and I'll have again all of the description, all of the things that I'm working in and working on in the description. So if you're interested in like the drawing tablet that I'm using and the program that I'm working in, all of that will be down in the description below. And again, if you are enjoying this live stream, please, please, please hit the thumbs up. That lets me know A, that you watched it, and B, that it lets YouTube know that you found this content valuable and that you enjoy hearing me talk. Or at least you enjoyed the process of watching me create this particular tarot deck. So if you're just joining me, we've had a couple new people come in. I am still working on the Two of Swords. And yes, this was a card that I had planned on finishing before today, but life's, life happens. The time got away from me. I swear to goodness, Friday felt like Thursday, and you couldn't tell me yesterday wasn't Friday. So Sunday kind of jumped up on me pretty quickly. But we're here and we're going to just go with it, right? So yeah, we're working these. What am I doing? I'm erasing. We are working out the just working out the details. We're moving around this particular picture, and we're talking a little bit about some of the things that I've learned taking on a big project like the a tarot deck, right? So I'm about halfway through 78 cards. It's taken me 5 years to get here. And one of the things that I've learned is to not compare myself and not to compare how long it's taken me to the next person who may also be working on a tarot deck project. Why? Because that will drive you up the wall. I have been watching, there's a guy on Instagram that I really like. His name is RX Man, and he is like ran through a brand new tarot deck project based on the Rider-Waite-Smith system, and they look phenomenal. They look gorgeous, and I'm like, God, dog, he went through that really, really quickly, right? But I can't sit and say, oh man, I should be working faster and this, like this, that, and the third. I don't know what the heck that man's life is like. I have no idea, right? And so I'm not going to compare myself. I'm not going to take myself through that drama of sort of comparing myself to the next person, right? And it's been like that with other decks. Plenty of decks, tarot decks are constantly coming out. It's a very never ending sort of cycle of things that come out. It's constant, right? So I'm not going to spend my time, comparing myself, comparing my journey, comparing my victories or my challenges to the next person, because I don't know what their life is like, right? And even if I did, that's their life, that's their journey. And it's okay. We're all sort of walking a different walk, right? And it's important not to, not to get too caught up in what other people are doing and comparing that to yourself. So I talked a little bit about this on our last couple of live streams where I've known people who started their YouTube channels at the very same time that I've started mine, and they are like huge, right? But I can't sit and be like, oh man, I don't have as many people watching, and I don't have time for that, and I don't really care. I don't really care. I don't know if that's a harsh sentiment. It is much more important to me to have the right people watching it, right? So I really want to have people who can identify with what I'm doing, who feel something from what I'm doing, who enjoy the artwork, who enjoy me, right? I want to have people around me who are enjoying sort of being here on this Sunday. And that's much more important, right? Sometimes it's much more important to get in front of the right people and not just, any old body. And that's okay. And that's not to say that, like, these people who are doing really well, hey, PL, are like just doing it for anybody because they have their audience. And again, there's an audience for every single thing. So don't allow someone else's journey, someone else's successes dictate whether or not you even try, right? Because you don't know what their life is like. And two, we're only getting a snippet of a snippet of a snippet of people's, day to day and whatnot. We don't get the lead up. We don't know what kind of struggles they're having behind the scenes. We don't know what kind of successes they're having behind the scenes. We only get to see what they allow us to see, right? So don't allow that to sort of keep you from thriving in whatever it is or trying whatever it is that you want to do. Very important. All right. So I think we're done with those bushes. Let's see. Where else can we move around? So let's go ahead and get into our figure a little bit. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I was a little bit nervous to start working on the figure on live because I honestly don't know yet how I want to approach it. And that's the truth, right? However, I do have a reference that I'm going to be pulling heavily from that I might just sort of use one of the figures in this particular reference to draw from, right? So if you see me looking down, you guys are just joining me. I am actually looking at my pen display, and we're drawing this in, real time. It's happening right now. Here it is. Okay. All right. So we have our lantern in, right? And that didn't really take a whole lot to do when we painted that a couple of lives back. So the way that I want to approach this, if I'm looking at a reference and I'm looking at what it is that I'm drawing, is I want to pay attention to my light source. In this particular case, the lantern is my light source. And so because it is hidden, sort of partially hidden behind his arm, or what looks, or in front of his arm, I guess, we want to sort of pay attention to how that lights this guy, right? So I would not light him quite the same as the figure here, because the figure that we're looking at and we're drawing from has light behind him, right? But if you've ever seen someone sort of stand in the middle of the sun, or like stand, behind a lamp, you usually only get their silhouette, especially when it's at night. So you sort of get an outline, right? But because this light isn't a huge light, right, we may not get as much information on sort of his right side. So we're going to start over here on the left, and we're going to figure it out, right? Here we go. All right. So I'm going to pull this orange, and we're going to, first of all, label this layer. And layers are the panel right above me if you guys are looking at the screen. And I'm going to layer this figure rim light. All right. And then from here, I'm just going to begin to add some, oh, first of all, let me turn off my mirror. Here. Where we at? All right, so now we do have our sketch still visible, but we do not have our mirrored layer. So we won't have like the sort of the symmetry effect. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller just to move it out the way. And we're going to go back to our figure rim light, and we're going to use this guy here as our main reference for our figure, and also this person here when we get into the clothes. All right, so here we go. So we're adding a little bit of rim light because he's going to be catching some of the light from his lantern, right? And some of it won't be like super bright or anything like that, because again, some of this is happening, the light is happening sort of in front of him and not necessarily behind him. But we do want to emphasize that he's holding a light, right? And this is also going to make our lamp appear brighter. It's gonna create a little bit of an optical illusion. So yeah, along the journey of creating a tarot deck, I have certainly learned a lot. And similar to when I was reading tarot, when I was like really, really heavily reading tarot, read it for Biddy Tarot's tarot community. I did it for her, so I've read for people literally all over the world. One of the things that taught me was to slow down, right? So I would intentionally do meditations and things like that to prepare myself. I learned grounding, or very effective grounding, because reading tarot is a very draining act. At least for me, it is. It's much the same as I did learning sort of, how to navigate that in Biddy Tarot, or as a tarot reader, being sort of open to the lessons of creating a tarot deck has taught me quite a lot. So again, if we run back through, one of the biggest things that I would suggest if you are going into creating a tarot deck is to have a little bit of a plan, right? And allow yourself to be flexible in that plan. You don't necessarily have to be super duper rigid. You don't have to, you really don't. I mean, I would say I would suggest having a plan, but I guess if you thrive winging it, then by all means wing it. But I would highly suggest having a little bit of a plan, at least a little bit of a roadmap. Now, you don't have to, again, go as far as, you know, um, planning everything down to an absolute T. I don't think that's necessary. You do want to be open to allowing yourself to experience, a change of mind, right? Allowing yourself to be able to pivot when things don't work. Something I've done a lot. Again, I have 4 major arcana cards left to create. That is the Chariot, which ironically was the first card that I that I went into creating. So the Chariot is still in need of being completed. I also have the sun left to do. I have the star left to do, and let's see, it's the chariot, sun, and the moon. So chariot, sun, moon, and the star are the four major arcana cards left to create for this deck. Now, I have worked on every last one of those cards at some point. They've all been worked on. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was just I wasn't very connected to those cards at the time. Maybe it was just that, my mind wasn't very clear about what I wanted. I don't know. But I have tried many different things for all four of those cards. And I could very easily, anyone could very easily say, oh man, I've gotten this far. These four cards are eluding me. I don't think I'm going to continue because, gosh, it must not be meant for me to finish because I'm having such a hard time. That's sort of a messed up way to look at it. The way I looked at it was okay, cool. I don't know what the heck I want to do with these cards. Let me pivot, right? And so we got into the minor arcana cards. And again, one of the things that I sort of did to remedy not having a plan, a remedy sort of try to eliminate those sorts of situations was to plan out four cards at a time. So I've learned a lot about project management. I've also learned a lot about what it takes to create an actual sort of deck from a manufacturer's perspective. Now, I know a lot of times we sort of get these ideas of things that we would like to do. And, I think that's awesome. I think you should always explore those things, but sometimes we're not necessarily prepared for what all is involved in creating these big projects, right? So for me, one of the things that I've learned was a lot about how manufacturing something like this works. Okay. So most of the decks that you see at Barnes and Noble, at your, local Botanica, different stores like that, most of them have been printed overseas, specifically in China. So if you're getting something printed in China, there's a slightly different, I won't say completely different, there's a slightly different culture there when it comes to producing a product as opposed to doing that here in the States. So preparing myself to have those conversations, learning how to um, address the manufacturer and how to speak to the manufacturer and what information to include, and sort of getting into learning customs and all of those things, right? The best time to buy, what times to avoid buying, and all of that sort of information is things that I had to learn on my own, a little bit on my own, I'll say. Working through the process of creating this deck. Now, I was fortunate when I started this back in 2019 that Benabel Wynn, who is a awesome teacher, she's a writer, has written lots and lots of created lots of resources for reading different things, not just tarot, but also oracle and I Ching and all kinds of things, right? She produced a course, which was like a little self-study PDF packet about creating your own tarot deck. And sort of as part of that, I was able to learn a lot about how to have different conversations with manufacturers, because that's something that she has successfully done 3 times. Right? Because she's successfully, at least 3 times that I know of, she has successfully completed 3 decks, right? So who better to learn from than someone who's done it? And so one of the things that she suggests is, of course, getting the information in terms of manufacturing, your pricing, and all of that, shipping and stuff like that. Now, these things will change over time, but just sort of getting an idea of how much all of that costs as early as possible. Why? Because you could have an idea to, do something and not be aware of how expensive or how inexpensive it is. And when it's time to go into manufacturing, you're twiddling your thumbs because you don't know where to move forward or how to move forward, right? So that was something that I did very early on. I contacted a couple of manufacturers. I started sort of that conversation. They were very kind. They were ones that she suggested contacting, and I was fortunate to be able to get some information from other deck creators about who they use and things like that. All of that information I would suggest doing very early on, so that again that you're prepared at least with an idea of how much all of that's going to cost you. How much money you need to raise if you're going to Kickstarter routes like I am. And so you can kind of prepare and set up your pricing in a way that's fair, not only to your customers, but also so that you can make a profit as well. Now, if you're in this and you're not interested in making a profit after you worked on something for so long, then good for you. But for me, being very realistic about this and being a business owner, it's important to me to be able to, one, create something that you all will be able to enjoy and that is very valuable to you, and all of those wonderful things, but also so that I can make a profit, right? So that's very important, right? So you want to find out how much all of that's going to cost you. You want to find out the process of creating a deck, the process of what do they need from you in order for you to have it manufactured. And also, one of the things that I would highly suggest is having samples done. Now, I am one of those people, of course, I am only halfway through this deck. I got sample prints done very early on, right? So not at a change manufacturer, I went through someone else. And so I had gotten made them a lot smaller than your normal tarot deck, or not your normal tarot deck, but smaller than my intended size. And I got the standard tarot deck size printed, right? So this did a couple of things. One, this allowed me to see how the colors would look. And one of the things that I found, and I don't know if it's because of the type of printing that I did or what, I'm not really sure. But one of the things that I discovered was that my images were too dark, right? This images that we're looking at is super dark. You guys can see it. From my perspective, because I'm looking dead at the screen, it looks a lot lighter. But it didn't take until I printed out the image itself, or had the image printed on the sort of a playing card. And of course, this is just a test card, that I found that the images were too dark. And so at that point, I think I had like 20 something cards done. I had to go and readjust all 20 cards so that they printed out as close to what I had in mind as I can. Now, because I am a graphic designer and I have sort of the know-how of how to do that, it was fairly easy to do, right? But the sooner you do something like this, the sooner you're able to make those adjustments. But while we're looking at this, so this is the size of your standard tarot deck, right? This is the size of your standard tarot deck. This, I think, is a 70 by 120 millimeters, right? The Cosmic Gateways Tarot is going to be a little bit bigger. All right, let me show you. So this is your normal tarot deck size, and this is Crow Tarot. Now, Crow Tarot is the deck that I am modeling the size of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot after. So if I were to put these two cards together, and I'll try to move them a little bit closer to the screen, the Crow Tarot, which is this back card, is a little bit taller and a little bit wider. Not by a whole lot, but just a little bit. I like this size a lot better than the standard size. So when it comes to our final print, we'll go with this particular size. And this deck is printed, I believe, and distributed by US Games. I like the size of it. It also gives me a lot more room for the image. So when I went to make these, I actually had to cut off quite a bit in order to resize these for your standard tarot deck size. Now, after these are manufactured, if you guys come back and say, I really don't like the large size, can we get like the regular standard size deck? Then, I'll take that into consideration. I'll very likely print them at a standard size. But for the time being, I like this size. I like it. So if I was to compare that to an oracle deck, because this is also smaller than your typical oracle deck, it's the same height but a different width. Here are two oracle cards, right? So this two very different oracle decks. This is the Toku oracle, and then this is Spirit Animal. They're the exact same size. So this is your standard oracle deck size two cards, right? If I were to put them up with the Crow Tarot, they are the exact same height, but Oracle is a little bit wider. So if that gives you a little bit more of an idea, just in case you haven't used Crow Tarot, that gives you a little bit more of an idea of the actual size of the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. So again, this is our standard tarot deck size, right? And this is a sample print that I had done, I think, at Making Playing Cards. I'm not really sure. I just needed to see if the colors were all right. So this is our standard tarot deck size, and then this is going to be the size of the finished product. Now, the key to this is making sure that I have good card stock, because if I go too thick, which tends to happen with indie decks, this is going to be very difficult to shuffle, right? I also want to make sure that I give you all a premium reading experience. So I have to sort of find balance between having a card that's too thick and then having a card that's easy to actually use and play with. So you have to kind of I have to sort of keep those things in mind. As I want to say, these two are Oracle cards. They're a little bit thicker than this particular tarot card. So we'll see. It's all about, finding the right sort of sweet spot. I'm thinking about 350 GSM. I do have, I believe that Benabel Wynn, who was the person who did the course that I had taken, I believe her decks are 350. They shuffle pretty nice. One thing that I've seen just sort of in different tarot communities is that people don't like gilding, which is the sort of gold. If you've ever seen a gold sort of border around the decks. A lot of people don't like that. I don't know. That's something that I am considering doing, but if that's something that maybe you think isn't a good idea, let me know. I would love to hear your feedback on that, especially if you are definitely, use tarot decks and things like that. So that's where we are. All of that I had to sort of learn on my own. Of course, take classes and things like that from different creators. And since then, I have seen some books and things, and people talk a little bit about how to create a tarot deck, and how to do that. I think that for the most part, unless you are, drawing it and creating it yourself, if you're hiring somebody, you may have a very different experience. However, it is important to be aware of what all it takes to create a deck. Because yes, you're hiring someone to do it, right? Depending on how you negotiate your contract, you may or may not own copyrights to that image. That's just sort of how it goes when it comes to hiring a professional creative. That's how it goes. Sometimes you have a work for hire where the artist is giving up all of their rights. And something like this, if you are an artist, I would highly recommend you don't, because it's not necessary. It really isn't. Um, Think of it like a artist signing over their masters or selling their masters, where yes, their voice is still, in the music, it's still them singing, but they are not able to benefit from the sale of that music or the licensing of that music outside of, their initial payment. So that's why I would highly suggest not selling your rights if you're an artist who's being hired to do a tarot deck. So that's something, if you are hiring, to kind of keep in mind, right? A lot of the times you don't really need, if you're hiring, you don't really need full copyrights. You can negotiate for exclusivity. You can negotiate for making sure that the artist doesn't, again, with exclusivity, the artist doesn't sell the rights to those images to other people. But I believe it is fair if I sit and spend, 5 years working on something, unless you're paying for it, I would like to be able to benefit from it down the line, if only to just use it for my portfolio and things like that. So that is something to kind of take into consideration. But as someone who may be hiring for an artist to create a tarot deck, I do believe it is important for you to understand what all is involved in creating, right? Now, I am painting some things into these pans that you really can't see. I can kind of see it. It is still very dark. I am sort of gradually brightening this scene up a little bit by a little bit. It will not be super bright again because my focal point is going to be the swords in the middle. So I don't want to give too much attention to my figure or the foreground. I just want it to, because I don't want your eye to pay too much attention to what's going on in front, right? I want your eye to go to the two swords and then the different pathways. So we are adding information to the foreground, but we're not spending a whole lot of time sort of putting it in, right? It's not necessary for us to do that. But what I will do is I will go back to my rim light, and I will add a little bit of that light down at the bottom, because we do have the light bouncing off of the ground. So it may not be as bright as it is near his arm, right? But I think it's fair for us to put a little bit of that down below, because he is, holding this light. And if it's lighting the ground, then surely it's lighting sort of the front of his body, right? So we want to keep those kinds of things in mind. So yeah, there a lot goes into creating a deck. A lot goes into publishing and things like that. When you're working with another artist, all of this stuff has to be discussed beforehand. So again, it's very important to know how these sorts of things work, so that when you're going into negotiations, you're not getting sort of beat, and everything's fair for everybody. Now, one thing I will say, and this is strictly based off the sorts of clients that I've had in the past, there is an idea that people go into projects, and I think they approach them from the prospect or from the perspective of, I don't want these people to beat me, right? Not everybody's out to beat you. That's the reality of it. Unfortunately, there aren't very many, there's not a lot of talk from people who have had successful creative relationships. And I think that's where people like myself kind of come in, and where I have created like the series Hire Like a Boss, where I can sort of help to bridge that gap, right? Because there are lots of people who are wanting to work with creatives. They're unable to find them, right? You may not know where to look, but two, you may not actually know how to have conversations and how to approach negotiations and things like that without knowing what to look for, what sort of is okay and what's acceptable, what's the standard practice for certain things. And so having sort of this level of transparency, I think is important. A, because it saves me a headache. So I don't have to do so much hand holding, with certain clients and things like that. I don't mind it at all. I really don't. But if I can provide some information for someone to benefit from, then all the better. Let's see. So I turned off my sketch just to sort of get an idea of what my figure looks like. It's not looking too bad. Not looking too bad. Again, I don't want to put too much emphasis on what's going on with him, because the idea is to draw the eye to the swords, right? That's sort of what I would like to do. What I do not think I like, and I'm checking my second screen so that I can kind of see a little bit better what the lighting and things like that looks like, because it's a lot brighter for me with my face in the screen. So I want to check and see all of that, make sure all of that is okay. So what I'm sort of noticing is that I could probably go a little bit lighter on his pants. So we'll do that. We'll kind of get into brightening this up a little bit so you can actually see that he's wearing pants, because he'll still, even though this is dark, he'll still have a little bit of atmospheric lighting, since this is a very blue scene. And so we're just going to add some of this. And none of this is pretty right now, for me anyway. I'm not loving much of it. I do really, really enjoy this. I like this. That's very satisfying. The area with the lantern in his hand, I do very much enjoy that. What I will do is, I'm noticing that this part of his hand sort of runs into the other. So I want to add just a little bit of a differentiation. Some of this stuff, again, you won't even see in the actual final card, but we want to do it so that I have a polished image, because I like to think a little bit forward in terms of how this stuff can, how these images can be used later on in the future. So a lot of times I'm adding details again that you won't even see in the cards, but I'm thinking like, okay, well, what would I need to do to make a crisp canvas print, right? Or what would I need to do if I wanted to make a crisp journal and things like that? So I do want to make sure that I don't spend too much time stressing over the details, but I also do want to make sure that if I decide to blow this up later on down the line, that it is really nice and well done. So that's what excuse me, I'm getting tongue tied all over the place, but that's what we're doing. And right now the computer is auto saving, and once it does that, I will zoom back out. So when you're working on a picture, when it comes to doing these details and getting really close into the image and things like that, one of the most important and valuable things that you can do is zoom out, right? Especially in digital art. Now, if you're working on an actual painting, the way that you would approach that is to just take a few steps back from it. Sometimes you can turn the canvas upside down. Sometimes you can flip it and things like that. And that'll help give you a fresher perspective and sort of see what areas of the picture you could work on. So like right here, his arm is getting, well, let me show you right here. His arm is getting a little bit lost in the sauce. So I really can't tell much of a difference between the lantern and his arm. And I do want to kind of separate those two. So the way that I will do that is to extend my rim light a little bit further, like this. And that way we push the lantern further in front of him, and it doesn't merge as much. So just sort of things like that you sort of have to keep in mind. But I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't zoomed out of it. Because if I'm looking like really close, I'm like, oh, that looks great. And I'll show you. I'm like, oh yeah, I love how that, lantern is looking and this, that, and the third. But from back there, once I zoomed out, I couldn't really see much of a difference between the lantern and his sweater. And that's something that we want to keep in mind. So our rim light is going to be heaviest right around the lantern, because he's holding it like right in his arm, right? So we want to keep, just be mindful of those sorts of things. So yeah, lots of things I've learned. creating a tarot deck. And would I do it again? Absolutely, absolutely. As a matter of fact, as I have sort of worked through this, I'm like, man, it would be real nice to have an accompanying oracle to go with it. Because oftentimes in readings, I don't know about you guys that do read, but for me, a lot of the times if I'm doing a reading, whether it's for myself or for someone else, I will often pull an oracle deck just so that I can, get an overview of the reading, right? So sometimes, we go through our shuffles and we do our spreads and all this and the third. Sometimes it's very clear what the message means, but sometimes you just need that little, like that extra little bit of razzle dazzle. And so I'll pull an oracle card. And a lot of times that sort of wraps up the reading. That kind of gives me a little bit more to think on, and it usually is quite accurate to whatever it is that I am whatever it is I found in that reading. And so I was thinking, man, I was like, this would be nice to have an oracle deck to go with it. So that it is something that I have already began to sort of toy around with. I don't know yet. Again, that'll be, a little bit far into the future. I don't know how I would like to approach it. I do know what I enjoy in oracle decks, right? So I really like the let's see, I'll show you the animal spirit oracle. So I have two. So this is a great example. All right. So I have the Toku oracle, which just has the name of the card in it. And this is the Manipura chakra, right? So that's it. And then you have to consult the book that comes with it to find out what the Manipura chakra is, right? But I like animal spirit because what it has is the name of the card, which is the badger spirit in this case. And then it also has an affirmation at the bottom so that if I don't want to consult the book, I at least know to be fearless and bold, right? That is the message from this card. And if I wanted to dive deeper, then I can get into the book. Now, one thing I do know about Oracle is that they often rely very heavily on the books and the sort of written material that comes with them. So I want to be able to sort of balance it out. I do have one, matter of fact, it's the companion to the Crow Tarot. She just has words on it. I've seen some others with just, words and things like that. But I think I would go with the affirmation version, like just because that's what I like, right? So I want to create something that I would actually want to use. So we're adding a little more detail to the bottom of this man's pants. Again, none of this is great. I know for sure next week we'll be done with this particular card and we'll be on the next one. But for the time being, I do want to set myself up for success for when I actually work on this afterwards, after the live stream later on this week, so that I can tighten this thing up, right? So we're just laying in some basic shapes, very much like we did the background, and that's sort of the way we're approaching it. So I love being able to work on this card. Like I said, I always get really, really sweet messages from you guys. And whenever I was like not working on it, but it would be on my mind, I would always get like someone ask me or they'll send me a DM like, what's going on? So for those people who have done that, I greatly appreciate you. It's like getting the message from the universe right when I need it. Like, okay, it's time to get back to work. So right before I started doing these live streams, I had heard from on three very separate occasions, three people who do not know each other messaged me or sent a message to me by way of someone else asking about this particular project. And, at that time, I was already sort of in the mind of, okay, I've spent a lot of time working on things that aren't necessarily serving me this year. Right. And so it's time for me to get back to what it is that I intended to do and intended to have done so long ago. So if you were those people, like I don't take offense at all when people ask me, so like when is it due? Well, I had one person about a year ago was like, hey, it was like last October. She was like, hey, I'm trying to save up for your deck. When is it gonna be ready? I'm like, well, don't worry, sis, you got a long time. You got quite a while before it gets ready. But if you are not in the newsletter list, right? those people will have, when it's time, will have all of the information about the pricing, about the Kickstarter sort of rewards, about the whole process before it goes public. So if you have not joined the newsletter list, be sure to do that. One of the quickest ways that you can do it is by clicking the link in the description, or if you go to my website, blewisarts.com, there will be a pop-up that comes up, and from there you can sign up to join the newsletter list. Those people are going to hear about it first, right? So those people have been with me for a while. Most of them have been with me for a while. We do get new people from time to time, and so those folks will hear about pricing and all of those sorts of things before it ever goes public. So if that's something that you've been concerned about or something that you're curious about, I would highly suggest joining that particular newsletter list. Now, I do my best to send out a newsletter about once a month. Sometimes more than that. It just kind of depends on what's happening. So this, for October, for instance, I have the Memphis Comic Expo coming up. So you guys in the newsletter list will hear a little bit about that and what's available, or what will be available at that particular convention. So yeah, if you're wanting to sort of get that kind of information, I would highly recommend joining the newsletter list. Also, if you want to have more of a say of like what happens on this particular channel, what you would like to see, those kinds of things, that's the place to do that. Because again, these people are, or the people who join the newsletter list, are heavily invested and have, a lot of them have been with me for a really long time, but they're heavily invested in sort of the outcome of this project. And so if you are wanting to sort of join the fold and also give me your input, that will be the place to do it. From time to time, I do ask it publicly, like we did a few weeks ago when I asked what you guys wanted to see on this particular channel. So there are opportunities there to do that kind of thing. But again, if if you really want to sort of get in the midst of what's going on with this project, I would highly recommend joining that newsletter list. So again, we're just adding some details and things like that. And I am checking my second monitor to see how that's reading on screen, because it's actually giving me probably a much more accurate reading of how it would print than me actually, staring at my pen display. So yeah, I think we're getting to the point now, because we've reached about an hour and 2 minutes. So we're getting to the point where I am probably going to wrap up today's live stream here in a bit. I can work a little bit longer, but we're not going to hold you too long. And if you're watching this live or the replay again, I would like to sincerely thank you for joining me here. I love to have you every Sunday. Whether you say anything to me or not, I appreciate everyone who comes in and speaks. But if you don't, it's all good. I ain't mad at you. I appreciate you for being here. I don't know today if I rambled any. I don't. Sometimes I worry about that. I'm like, I hope I'm making. I hope I'm making sense since I'm talking 90 miles an hour. Some days I do have or some Sundays I do have sort of a plan of what I would like to talk about. Other Sundays I'm just winging it. Today is one of those just winging it days. It was on my mind though to share with you guys some of the things that I have learned along this process along the process of creating a tarot deck, specifically this project. But for the most part, I'm just hoping I'm not I'm hoping I'm not doing too much rambling. But anyhow, I think we're going to call it there. That looks pretty good. I'll probably work on him a whole lot more, because I'm not completely satisfied with the way that he looks in like the sort of the lighting and things like that, especially comparing it to our background. Now, again, I don't want to over render this, because I don't want your eye to go to the person, even though, he's in the middle of the screen. I want your eye to sort of make its way to the Two of Swords. But I think he can be tightened up quite a bit. So we'll work on that a little bit later. And by next week, we should be done. So we're gonna drop it off here. It's been about an hour and 3 minutes. I thank you so much for joining me, whether you are watching this live or the replay. Let me know. Do a shout out for me if you can, if you feel like it, down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this live stream and would like to see more, be sure to hit the thumbs up. And if you want to be notified for any time I go live or post new videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. So I want to wish you all a creative and prosperous week, and I hope you have a wonderful week. And until next time,